Okay, we are, I can't say celebrate because someone passed away, but we are celebrating the Yartzeit of Noson of Breslov, which was yesterday, Asara B'Tevis. Who was Reb Noson? He was the closest disciple of Rabbi Nachman. Oh, see, I'm not that late. He was the closest disciple of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He was a young man of 22 years old when he was looking for Chassidus. He was looking for, there's got to be a higher purpose in life than just growing up, going out to work, and in the end, being old, decrepit, and dying. There's got to be something more to it than that. So Reb Noson began searching. What is life all about? What is the meaning? We're Jewish. What is the meaning of Torah? What is the meaning of Tefillah? What is the meaning of Yiddishkeit? What's it all about? And Reb Noson found Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He found him as a Rebbe, as a teacher, as a master. Rabbi Nachman will have to revert to Rabbi Nachman's teachings for a little bit before we go into Reb Noson. Rabbi Nachman was very unique among all the Hasidic masters, even or perhaps especially today. The Hasidic masters all knew what life was all about when they all served Hashem and they all spread Torah and they taught people, they brought life to them and whatnot for their generation. Yes, they taught more, they went on to future generations, but it went up to a certain point. Rabbi Nachman, at his time, he passed away, he was 38 and a half, a young man. And yet, he foresaw all the generations that we have today, all the things that go on, all the complexity of life, all the diversity in life that we have today. Rabbi Nachman saw it, foresaw it, and gave us antidotes of how you could survive the day. Right? Today, everyone speaks about joy and happiness, fighting depression. Right? It's one of the major factors today. Rabbi Nachman spoke about this very heavily 200 years ago. Rabbi Nachman said you have to find the good. Right? Everyone talks about that, finding the good in today's world and finding the good in what you got. Right? I heard someone say once, to look at how many people have to thank the Arabs. Right? How many millions of people are employed in airport security because of the Arabs? You have to find a good point in everyone, right? But Rabbi Nachman spoke about these things 200 years ago. He focused on not giving up, never giving up. When did he say that? 2 months before he passed away. He was sick nearly 3 years with tuberculosis, right? He would cough up blood. He was really sick. His lungs were destroyed. 2 months before he passed away, he was lying down sick and on his deathbed nearly, and he said, never give up. Right? You have inner strength. Fall back on it. You could supply yourself with a lifeline to continue further in life. Rabbi Nachman spoke about money. You have to be careful how you spend your money, right? He didn't have plastic money at that time, which people, today are not careful how they spend and whatnot. But he was talking about regular, you have some money in your pocket, learn to hold on to it. Don't have to spend it right away. You can contemplate whether the purchase is worth it or not. He spoke about honesty in business. He spoke about integrity. all the things that we have today, certainly in governments, the honesty and integrity. He confronted it all, and he taught us how to live. But whatever he taught us would have remained with him, like it remained with all the other Hasidic masters of the time. Had he not had Reb Noson of Breslov as a student, Reb Noson, who would record everything Rabbi Nachman said and understand that it has power that can continue till the end of time. And if you study Rabbi Nachman, right, you study it through the lens of Reb Noson, you'll be able to see how it applies to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a Torah lesson, right? He speaks about Shabbos. What does it apply to me during the week, right? Tefillin, what does it apply to me? Kashrus, what does it apply to me 24/7, right? When I eat, I have to eat kosher, but I'm not eating 24/7, and so on and so forth. In monetary matters and laws of marriage and whatnot, Reb Noson was able to mine the teachings of Rabbi Nachman and bring it forth to us today. That is the Yartzeit we are celebrating, and I guess we have to give you some background to what Reb Noson was. He came from a family of misnagdim, those who are opposed to Hasidus, but he wasn't satisfied with the life. Are any of us here willing to say that my life is perfect? Or maybe I should be out there searching what my life really should be all about, right? Maybe I should be searching. Maybe there's something more to my life than just, the standard picture you see of an American. He goes out to work, he comes home at night, takes a beer, sits in front of the television. For a couple of hours, he goes to sleep, and he gets up in the morning, same thing goes on day after. We as Jews, is that the way we're supposed to live? Or is there something higher in our lives that we can go for? Reb Noson searched. Reb Noson looked for what the emes is all about. And Reb Noson was able to find a mentor who would teach him. And so he started studying. Reb Noson knew all of Talmud, all of Medrash, the Zohar, before he became a student of Rabbi Nachman. But it wasn't enough. He knew he had to search for life. Rabbi Nachman speaks about renewal. Rabbi Nachman himself said, not only isn't there a word that comes out of my mouth without freshness, something new to me, even a breath I don't take without feeling a freshness in life. Life is beautiful. Life is fresh. And Reb Noson says this in the Likutei Halachos. He says, can you imagine? We're Jews, and we daven, and we learn. It's listless, right? We just go through the motions. Why don't we put some life and feeling into it? He said, would you eat an old piece of bread if you have a fresh piece of bread? Would you eat an old spoiled fruit if you have a fresh fruit? You want whatever you're going to consume to be fresh. Why not put some freshness in your davening? It's not the same old davening as yesterday or last year or 5 or 15 years ago. It's a new davening. Put some freshness. Feel some freshness. Feel alive with it. That's what Reb Noson is teaching. That freshness that Rabbi Nachman was speaking about, Reb Noson's articulating it so that we too could partake of a Geshmak davening, of a Geshmak Shabbos. Shabbos, the Zohar says, V'shomru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, right, it's a Shabbos, La'asois es ha-Shabbos, to make Shabbos l'dorosom, for his generations, l'dorosom, right? The Zohar says, l'dorosom is without nikudot, without dots. If you look at it, there's vav missing, there's letters missing. Read it l'dirasam, to their houses, so that when Shabbos arrives, Shabbos should be bouncing off the walls of the house. right? You have balloons, you hang up, whatever. There's some life and vitality to it. Reb Noson says, put it into Yedira. That's what the Zohar is teaching us. Put it into your house that you feel the Shabbos. Shabbos has some special life, some special feeling, and so on and so forth. This is what Reb Noson is trying to bring out. We'll take it a step further now, and we'll give you a little piece of Reb Noson's Likutei Halachos about kashrus. We mentioned kashrus earlier. Kashrus. Meat, if it's slaughtered properly, salted, you go through the whole rigmarole how to make a piece of meat, you can eat the meat. Milk, if you go to the cow, squeeze the udder, you have a glass of milk, you can have the milk. You're allowed to eat milk, and you're allowed to eat meat as long as it comes from a kosher source. Are you allowed to mix the two together? No. Okay. You're not allowed to mix the two together. What if you do? It becomes absolutely forbidden, as if it was the worst treif in the world. It's even worse than actual treif. But there's no reason given for it in the Torah. The Torah doesn't say why you can't mix meat and milk. Along comes Reb Noson and starts explaining to us. Let's think about this. There are certain things that we call an act of God. It's an act of God. It happens. This is what happened, whatever the case is, called the election of Trump, an act of God, or other things that happen in the world, a tsunami, a flood, earthquake, whatever. There's an act of God. There are things that God does for us that brings to our door. If it's a shidduch, if it's a business deal that we weren't expecting and whatnot, there are things that God brings to us, to our hands. Then there's a piece of meat. Meat, if you want to eat meat, you have to really work hard. Take a 2,000-pound ox, or 4,000, and slaughter it. You know, you got to hold that ox until you can get that knife under and slaughter it. Skin it, pull out the lungs, check them out, check the stomach, whatever you may have to check. Go through the rigmarole of finding out the treif parts of the body, the fats, and the blood vessels that you have to remove. And then you can first take the meat, salt it, and then you can first begin to cook it to make it edible. Okay? So there's something like milk that comes to you right away. Squeeze the udder. It's right there. And there's something you have to work very hard for. And that's the way our lives always are. There are things that come to us, and there are things that we have to work very hard for. Each one unto itself is absolutely kosher. Each one is absolutely kosher. But you have to do whatever you have to do to get it. Reb Noson explains that the milk is what God does for us. The meat is what we have to do. We're put on this earth, and we have to do what we have to do. We have to become the person we're supposed to become, deal honestly, deal with integrity, deal with faith, right? Raise a family, whatever it is that we have to do, we have to do. Go out, earn the living and whatnot. This is what meat represents. The two of them you cannot mix up. God will do what he's going to do, always. But what we have to do, we can't sit back and say, Hashem, you take care of it for me. I have my life to live, I have to go ahead and do it. So Reb Noson is explaining the laws of kashrus, the laws of meat and milk. But then he goes on and he says, but this is only if it's kosher. This only could work if the source of what you're doing is kosher. What if it's not kosher? What if you dabbled with something in life that wasn't right? You messed it up good? And he gives an example. Honey. Right? It's a delicacy. It's been around for who knows how many years. It's wonderful, it's beautiful. Where does the honey come from? A bee. No, you never heard someone go into a restaurant, ask for bee soup, pea soup maybe, but not bee soup, right? You don't hit it, it's disgusting, it's horrible, people are afraid of it, a bee sting could kill a person. Yet, the bees are very busy working and they produce honey. So too, Hashem is beyond all the natural laws. What He is going to do, it's a natural law. He's going to do it. What meat is, we have to do. But Hashem is beyond that. Hashem can take even the worst thing that a person did and turn it into a block of honey. And turn it into the sweetest thing too. It's with tshuva. We can do it. So this is how Reb Noson approaches a concept of kashrus. And this is one of the ideas that we have to recognize and realize that the Torah is there for all of us 24/7. How do we partake of it? All right? So, Reb Noson had a difficult life, and he was born into a wealthy family. He became part of the business, but he wasn't very happy in the business, traveling around. He wanted to study more, he wanted to learn more, and daven more, and whatever. Eventually, his father's business was wealthy enough to support him. So he went and he grew tremendously. But the business went bankrupt after a while. Reb Noson was left without a source of income. And the fact is that it didn't deter him from serving Hashem. It didn't deter him from learning. It didn't stop him from davening. He was able to go forth and do his avodas Hashem, despite the fact that everything was falling out around him. His family were misnagdim. They were very much opposed to his becoming a Breslover, any chosim, especially a Breslover, but he became a Breslover. And he followed Rabbi Nachman. 8 years he was a student. Rabbi Nachman passed away in 1810. Reb Noson was then 30 years old. And the mantle of leadership passed to Reb Noson. At that time, the Hasidim and the Misnagdim weren't fighting as much as they were 20, 30 years before, during the time of the Baal Shem Tov. But there was enough fighting among the Hasidim to deter anyone from becoming a Chosim too. There was a lot of opposition to the Breslover Hasidim. And Reb Noson stood up and they asked him, take over the Hasidus, become a Rebbe. Like it was becoming habitual then, what you have to do is the Rebbe passes away, the son takes over the business and becomes the new Rebbe. Right? Reb Noson refused to become a Rebbe. He says, I am a student. I am a vessel to receive the light, not a vessel that's going to become a Rebbe unto his own. And here's where you have the greatest power of Breslover Hasidus. Rabbi Nachman said, I want my students to make other students, and their students should make other students, and so on until Mashiach comes. The idea behind it was the message that Rabbi Nachman has is one that's so powerful, one that's so incredible that it could actually guide a person no matter where you are, where you're from, where you're going, and whatnot. This is the power of Rabbi Nachman. Reb Noson understood that and refused the mantle of leadership. And he was as great as anyone who lived in his generation. So Reb Noson taught Breslover Hasidus. What we have today from Rabbi Nachman is all due to Reb Noson. What we have is Reb Noson traveling to Eretz Yisrael pioneer. In those days, someone just to travel to visit Eretz Yisrael was a great thing. Today, you hop on a plane, you go, you come back. Not a big deal, right? Maybe not so easy, but it's not a big deal. There's a land there that could accept you. There are hotels. There are places you can go, right? In Reb Noson's time, the land was very barren. There was very little to sustain the people and whatnot. There were only a few people, a handful of people. And yet, Reb Noson said, I have to have the land of Israel. I have to go. And he went during a very frightening time. It was the time of the Greeks and the Turks. They were fighting, and there were a lot of wars. One of the stops that they made on the way was I forgot the name of the island, but they had not long before murdered some 80,000 Greeks on the island, and this is the conditions that Reb Noson sacrificed in order to go to Eretz Yisrael. And he came back, and he began to lead the Breslov Hasidim, writing his own original thoughts. He wrote what's called Likutei Tefillot. Today, when I was in school, they taught us how to write letters. You remember that? Right? Today, I don't know if they teach them how to write letters or not. Usually it's just enough to text, right? Email, text, but you don't even have to know how to spell, right? You can just do whatever you want, no letters, it's fine. Communication, which between human beings is the most important thing that we need. Communication, husband and wife, parents and children, parents and grandchildren, whatever it may be. Business associates, you have to know how to communicate. Today we don't. Rabbi Nachman stresses communication. His first level of communication is speak to God. Every day, speak to Hashem. Or as a friend of mine puts it, how could you ever establish a relationship with someone with whom you never speak? Did you ever talk to Hashem? Story is told of someone who was asking a brisker. You know what the brisker Litvaks are? They split hairs on a blot gemara. Split hairs, literally. So they asked this brisker, prove to me that there's a God. Prove to me. He goes through a whole spiel and going back and forth and splitting hair. The guy walks away, he doesn't know. He meets the Lubavitcher Chassid. He says, prove to me there's a God. So the Lubavitcher goes into the Chassidus and explaining Chassidus and this and that, Sphirus, the Kabbalah. I mean, the guy still walks away. It's not proven to him that there's a God. He meets a Breslover. He says to him, prove to me there's a God. Prove to you, I just spoke to him. I just spoke to him. Right? Speak to God. When you do it once, you do it twice, you do it 3 times, 30 times, 100 times, you begin to realize who you really are. You're communicating with Hashem. You're also communicating with yourself. Because what are you speaking to Hashem if not articulating the things that are in your heart, the things that are on your mind, the things that you want to accomplish, the things that you want to find out what they're really all about? That's what you speak to God about. Anything is fear. Anything is fear game. So speak to Hashem. Put it down. We find it hard today. It's really hard. We're so, in Yiddish we say fayokt, we're so pursued. There's no time. Get up in the morning, got to run out, you got this, you got that. But at the end of the day, you look, what did you accomplish during the day? What am I going to communicate? My heart is verstoppt. My heart is sealed. Right? How do I get it out? Reb Noson wrote Likutei Tefillos, a sefer of prayers. prayer is built and based on the Likutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and he covers the entire gamut of what life is all about. He takes anything and everything that you could find in life, anything that you will encounter, and you name the subject. He speaks about it. And he shows you how to open your heart and pray to Hashem. He shows you how to communicate with Hashem. The first basic concept of what it means to be a human being. Animals communicate in a very, very odd way. Humans have the capability of communicating with speech. Animals don't have the power of speech. We do. And therefore, we could communicate and learn from each other. We could teach each other. We could share with each other. There are so many things to communication. Reb Noson's Likutei Tfilis opens that up. Reb Noson wrote letters to his Talmidim, to his students, encouraging them. And he showed them how to take Rabbi Nachman's teachings and put them to life, so that whatever was happening, they can learn from the Torah to take the Torah itself and apply it. Here's an interesting thing, if you want to apply it. You know the story of Yaakov and Rachel and Leah, right? Yaakov was going to marry Rachel, and then he ended up taking Leah first. Lavan pulled a trick on him. He gave him Leah first, and then he gave him Rachel. Then he agreed. The Torah tells us stories, but there is nothing in the Torah that the story is there that will not shed light on what we have to do in life. Yaakov, as described in Talmud, Medrash, and Zohar, represents the Torah. Right? Torah Tzivalon Moshe, Morosha Kilas Yaakov. Yaakov represents the Torah, the written law. Everything is in the written law. But we don't understand it unless we have the oral law, unless we have the Gemara, the Medrash, the Shulchan Aruch, and so on. Rachel represents the oral law. Why? What do you do with a sheep? The Zohar says, you shear it, right? It grows wool, and you shear it. So too, the oral law, the more you study it, the more you're able to shear off new laws and new ideas and new encouragement. I mean, take a look. I mean, how many thousands of rabbis are there in the world, all over the world? And every Shabbos they get up and they tell you something on the Parsha. And this is going on for how many years? 3,000? Right? 3,000 years, thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of rabbis all over. They're all telling you something on the Parsha, and it keeps on going. Where is this? This is the Rachel, the oral law, which keeps on regenerating again and again. Leah, what does she represent? Prayer. Leah, it says, V'einei Leah rakois. The eyes of Leah were soft. They were like overdeveloped because of all her crying, Rashi explains. She cried that she did not want to fall into the lot of Esav. People were saying, Yitzchak has two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Lavan has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. The elder for the elder, the younger for the younger. So Rachel would go to Yaakov. Leah was afraid she would fall into Esav's lot. She didn't want to be in the realm of evil, so she cried and cried and cried to Hashem to save her. She represents prayer. So Reb Noson takes it. It's awesome. Well, to me it is anyway, but I think to everyone else too. Reb Noson says, Yaakov is the Torah. The Torah was given to the Jewish nation. It's all encompassing. Everything is in there, right? But how do I apply it to myself? I need to know the oral law. I need to know what to do. And I also have to pray to Hashem. But what's most important, I guess, to know what to do. So Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel first, right? He's the written law, and he wants to marry the oral law. They will complement each other, and then they will have the knowledge of how to go forward in life. Okay, that sounds great. Lavan was a shyster, a trickster. His chicanery has no equal. I mean, just for an example, Yaakov said to Lavan, you changed my wages, 100 times. How long did Yaakov work by Lavan? 6 years, right? And he worked 14 years for his daughters. That was for the daughters. But for money, he worked for 6 years for wages. 6 years has 72 months. Lavan changed his wages 100 times. So like every 2-3 weeks, Lavan came back, no, we got to change the contract, right? This is the kind of guy Yaakov was dealing with. So Lavan takes Leah and puts her in the place of Rachel. Not only that, the Medrash says, Rachel had a deal with Yaakov. They made up signs between them. I'm going to say this, you say this, like you're challenged with what's the password today, okay? So they made up the passwords, and then Rachel saw that Leah was put in as the column. Leah's going to be embarrassed. Not good. So one opinion is that Rachel gave over the passwords to Leah. There's another opinion that Rachel slid under the bed so that when the two of them were together, Yaakov spoke and Rachel answered, right? This is what the Medrash says. So here we have this thing. Lavan was trying to ruin Klal Yisrael, right? But Hashem is the one who runs the world. As long as everyone is thinking of Kedusha, or everyone is thinking of Hashem, Hashem will work it out. Even if it looks wrong, it'll turn out right. So Leah came first. Because the truth is, you can't really understand and accept and wonder what the Torah is really all about unless you pray to Hashem and you ask Him to guide you on the right path. Then, when you study Torah, you'll understand. Look how many people misinterpret the Torah. Look, they just celebrated a holiday a couple of weeks ago, right? Of somebody who misinterpreted the Torah, right? They made a whole religion out of it, but they misinterpreted the Torah, right? And it happens even today. It happened even among great rabbis, right? You just take a look at what Rashi and Tosfos, they start talking. Tosfos can tear apart Rashi. It's not right, it's wrong. Kuntra said this, Rashi, right? That's in Kedusha. That's when they're both right. What do you imagine when they start taking people who don't know what they're talking about and they start distorting the Torah? The first step is the communication. The first step, when you want to be a Jew, I want to be Yaakov, I want to be a Jew, my first step is to pray to Hashem. And then, Rachel, I'll be able to get her. I'll be able to acquire Rachel. Rachel stood under the bed. When Yaakov was asking the questions with Leah, Rachel was answering. Because the Torah itself will turn to you, the Torah itself will now give you the knowledge and the information of what you really should be praying for. That's the way Reb Noson comes to the conclusion of what happened with Yaakov and Rachel and Leah and so on. Right? Lavan meant the wrong way. It turned out to be the right way. The first thing we have to do, communicate to Hashem. And fact is, if you take a look at the davening in the morning, we say Modeh Ani. We start davening, thanking Hashem. But before we do anything, we have to say the Birchas HaTorah. We have to say the blessing on the Torah. That's our prayer to be able to enter into what the Torah is really all about. and how it could feed me, and how it can give me encouragement, how it can give me energy, how it can give me faith, how it could stand by me even in my most difficult times. Reb Noson continued his life, and when he was 55, a terrible opposition arose against him from different Hasidus. And Reb Noson was pursued, and they wanted to send Reb Noson, exile him to Siberia. And they even actually said, you're allowed to kill Reb Noson. That was from the leaders of some Hasidus at the time. If you read the period of Reb Noson's life when he was being pursued, you find that Reb Noson said, I am not going to be from the pursuers. If I have to be pursued, I'll be pursued. Why? The Medrash tells us, Parshas Emor, that Elokim Yevakesh es Nirdof. Pasuk in Koheles tells us, God seeks one who is pursued. If we feel suffering in our lives, if we feel difficulties, this one's after me, that one, this, whatever is going, God will be seeking you. You are closer to Hashem at that moment than if you're the other way around. You're the guy who's fighting and arguing. So Reb Noson said, Reb Noson had very powerful friends who had an in with the Russian Tsar. They told him, give me permission, in 24 hours you won't have one enemy. You won't have one enemy. Reb Noson said, I don't want to be from the pursuers. Let me be the pursued. So for 3.5, nearly 4 years, Reb Noson was exiled from his city where he lived in Breslov. He was exiled to a different city, and he was under judgment of whether he can continue, because they put him in as somebody who was rebelling against the government. There was a lot of things that were going on. In the end, Reb Noson, with his silence, he was able to accept the persecution, and he came out, and we have him today. It's 200 years, 172 years since Reb Noson. This was Reb Noson. And what's amazing about it is one of the books he wrote was called Likutei Halachot, the collection of laws that we mentioned some ideas before. What are? It's 8 volumes that Reb Noson wrote on the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Nachman told him, take the laws of Shulchan Aruch, take a teaching of Rabbi Nachman, and build a mosaic out of it that will explain how the law applies to anyone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Do that. Reb Noson did it. The laws, the discourses that he wrote during the years of persecution reflect everything that was happening to him, how they chased him, how they imprisoned him, what they did to him. And he writes about it in a way how we understand this is what happens to a Jewish soul. It has to go through these exiles in order to purify itself. That's the way he viewed it. It's a purification process. That's why I'm suffering. And he really suffered. Then afterwards, Baruch Hashem, he continued writing and writing and writing in the most amazing discourses that I have ever seen, or that the world has ever seen. I say this because some of you, maybe many of you, or all of you know that we have translated Likutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman's magnum opus. We've translated it into English with footnotes so that anybody, even who's unlearned, could open up the book and understand everything Rabbi Nachman says. And I thank Hashem, we finished Likutei Tefillot, we put it into English, we have a translation that anybody could read, the tefillos, the prayers, and we have now begun the project of translating Likutei Halachot, so that this treasure could be available to every single person on earth. And Be'ez Hashem, it will be. Reb Noson, towards the end of his life, last week, had a dream. In the dream, he saw Rabbi Nachman with one of his books. Rabbi Nachman had two books. One was called Sefer HaNisraf, a book that was burned. Rabbi Nachman's life was in danger from illness, and he ordered the book burned because it was either Rabbi Nachman or the book that would go. So it was called Sefer HaNisraf. He ordered it burned. There was another Sefer called Sefer HaGonos, the hidden book that nobody ever saw. Reb Noson had seen the Sefer HaNisraf. So in the dream, he sees Rabbi Nachman carrying the Sefer HaNisraf, and he says, I'd like to learn it. I'd like to study it. Rabbi Nachman said, for that you have to come to me. So Reb Noson got a little bit afraid. He understood what the implication of that dream was. And a week later, he passed away. And when he passed away, some of the last few words he said was Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach, which we say in Shemona Esrei every day. Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach. And if you add up the words, the letters, the numerical value, the gematria of Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach, you'll find that it adds up to 500. 500 is the same numerical value as Noson. It's also 500. Why is that? Because Reb Noson, throughout the Likutei Halachos, speaks to anybody and everybody and encourages them. You have tremendous powers inside. And you know what? Hashem is greater than anything you can ever imagine. So all you have to do is realize, take your inner strength and turn to Hashem, because He has infinite levels of kindness. Chanun hamarbe l'sloach. Someone, a person who's kind, or someone who's kind, God, who gives a lot of forgiveness. He's always forgiving, He's always drawing us close. That is the power, what Reb Noson came down more than anything else to teach us, that we have incredible powers inside. There is an infinite God, and He's always willing to forgive. All we have to do is learn to communicate with Him, turn to Him, and Be'ez Hashem, we'll all find out what life is really all about. Not the same dreary again and again and again, but rather each day has a freshness, each day has something to offer us, and each day we could partake of that good and internalize it in our lives. So that's my little offering here tonight. I'm open for any questions that anyone has about Breslov, about Noson, about the books, about anything really, if you want to talk about it. And feel free. I apologize again for our late arrival. It was something that we could not foresee. But I'm sure we all know that there are medical emergencies that arise. Baruch Hashem, this one ended good. So we're here, and everything should be well. And anyone has any questions, feel free. If you